Welcome to the deep dive. This is where we take the sources you're curious about and, well, we extract the knowledge you need pretty quickly. So today, we're diving into a really interesting piece by Alexandr Wang. It's called Optimism Shapes Reality.
Yeah, this one came from the learner, right? We look at how our expectations around time can actually change, well, reality.
Exactly. Psychology meets project planning almost.
Kind of. And our plan is to pull out the key ideas from Wang's article. And specifically for you, the learner, we'll point out some of the English he uses along the way, some interesting phrases.
Sounds good. So Wang kicks off with this really strong memory from Scale AI's early days. He says he viscerally remembered things moving at warp speed. Okay, viscerally. What's that about?
It means like a deep gut feeling, not just thinking it, but really feeling it, instinctively.
Got it. And warp speed, that's like super fast, right, from Star Trek.
Exactly, incredibly fast.
Hmm.
And he was worried about losing that pace, that agility, as the company got bigger. He wanted to keep what he termed high alpha execution.
High alpha execution. Sounds like business jargon.
Kinda is. It just means getting really important, impactful stuff done, and done well. Big results from your effort.
Right. He was worried individuals wouldn't feel that direct impact anymore.
Precisely. Which brings us to his main point about the power of scope.
Okay, scope. In engineering, Wang says this is basically the time estimate for a project, right?
Yeah, how long you plan for it to take. And here's the twist. He argues that the scope, the estimate itself, often ends up dictating how long the task takes, more than, say, how hard the task actually is.
Whoa, okay. That seems backward.
It does. He puts it in this sentence. Let me see.
Oh, yeah.
While definitionally it seems like how long things inherently take to get done influence the scope, the causality actually mostly goes the other direction.
Okay, that's a bit dense. Let's unpack that.
Right. So definitionally, by definition, you'd think, okay, hard task equals long time estimate. That makes sense.
Sure.
But he's saying, nope, it mostly works the other way. The time we give a task, that's what stretches or shrinks the work.
So if we expect it to take ages, it probably will. And if we expect it quick.
It often is. It's weirdly powerful.
He uses marathon running to show this. Right?
Yeah, it's a great example. He looked at finish times for millions of runners, and overall, the time spread out in a typical bell curve. He calls it an approximate Gaussian distribution.
Okay, Gaussian distribution, the bell curve. Most people finish around the average time. Fewer are super fast or super slow, like height you mentioned.
Exactly like height. But here's the interesting part. There were big spikes in people finishing right at the round numbers, like 3 hours, 3.34 hours.
Huh. Not smoothly distributed there.
Not at all. And Wang thinks that's because people set those round numbers as their goals. I will break 4 hours.
And they push just hard enough to hit that target.
Right. It becomes this all or nothing thing. He calls it a 0-1 loss function.
0-1 loss. Okay, so it's like you either make the goal, 0 loss win, or you miss it, 1 loss fail. Finishing at 4.01 feels way worse than 3.59 if 4.0 is your magic number.
Precisely. The target itself drives the final push. It's less about physical limits sometimes and more about that mental target.
He also touches on the 4-minute mile, doesn't he?
Briefly, yeah. The idea that everyone knew it was physically impossible.
Until Roger Bannister did it.
And then suddenly, lots of other runners started breaking it too.
So the belief, the perceived limit, was maybe the real barrier once that shifted.
Reality seemed to shift with it. Optimism breaking through, you could say.
This leads him to something he calls the limbo effect. And I think, a lot of us might recognize this one.
Oh, yeah. Tell me more.
Well, he talks about students, right? Finishing papers just before the deadline, even stuff they actually like doing.
Yes. Parkinson's law, almost.
Right.
Work expands to fill the time available.
Kind of. It's like that limbo dance game. How low can you go? We aim to slide just under the bar, the deadline.
That's a good way to put it. Wang's phrase is simple but effective. No matter where we set the bar, we're great at being just under it.
It really captures that tendency, doesn't it? We pace ourselves to the expectation.
Yeah, his term metaphorical limbo really works there. We're not always pushing our max, just meeting the set limit.
So what's the opposite of that?
High urgency situations, like your website's down, or you're an early stage startup fighting to survive.
The deadline is basically now.
Exactly. There's no scope saying fix this in 3 days. The consequences of not fixing it immediately are huge. So action is fast, much faster than if there was a comfortable scope set.
Right. No time for lingoing then.
None. And he sort of illustrates this conceptually, thinking about how task completion times might spread out, like that Gaussian curve again. In that high urgency, deadline is now scenario, you get one distribution, let's call it figure one.
Okay.
But then, so you introduce a realistic scope, maybe the average time from that first scenario, call it figure two. What happens? People might start pacing themselves to that realistic time. The urgency drops a bit.
And things actually take longer on average.
That's his point. So simply introducing the scope has made us move slower. It's a bit paradoxical.
It really is. Setting a reasonable target slows things down. So what does he suggest?
Setting an optimistic scope, aiming faster than maybe seems realistic.
Like aiming for the 10th percentile time instead of the 50th?
Something like that, yeah. The idea is to keep that urgency, that pressure, alive. You might not always hit that super optimistic target, sure. But on average, you'll likely finish faster than if you'd set a comfortable, realistic one.
Because the optimism maintains the drive.
Exactly. Which leads to his core statement. Put another way, optimism shapes reality. Simple, but really profound when you think about it.
It is. But he also mentions a problem, right? Engineers often overscope.
Yeah, they tend to estimate longer times than needed. Overscoping.
Why do they do that?
Well, often because the penalty for being late for underscoping is worse in many teams than finishing early. You know, missing deadlines causes more trouble than having extra time.
Makes sense from their perspective, I guess. But Wang says this caution actually hurts overall speed.
Right. This consistent overscoping, this pessimism baked into the estimates, slows everything down cumulatively.
Okay, so just for the learner to underscope is to estimate too little time, and overscope is to estimate too much.
Perfect. And this leads directly to Scale AI's internal mantras, or credos,
Which are?
up the tempo and ambition shapes reality.
Well, up the tempo, so move faster, don't get stuck in long plans.
Pretty much. Keep the pace high, maintain urgency, and ambition shapes reality. Well, that's just reinforcing this whole optimism idea. High expectations drive results.
It's like the antidote to the limbo effect he talked about.
Exactly. He even quotes Steve Jobs.
Oh, yeah, what's the quote?
Jobs said something like, "I've learned over the years that when you have really good people, you don't have to baby them. By expecting them to do great things, you can get them to do great things."
Baby them. Yeah, like coddling them, treating them like they can't handle challenges.
Right. Jobs believes setting the bar high, expecting greatness, is how you get greatness. Don't lower the bar just because it seems hard.
That fits perfectly with Wang's point.
It really does. And Wang finishes by encouraging doers and makers, anyone creating things, to consciously use optimism. Let that optimism shape your reality, he says.
And it's not just about one task, is it? He talks about the bigger picture.
Yeah, the cumulative effect.
Yeah.
These seemingly small adjustments in mindset, task by task, add up across a team, across a company, a lack of optimism, constant pessimistic scoping that leads to stagnation. He uses that phrase, death by 1,000 paper cuts.
That's such a vivid idiom, like lots of tiny, insignificant problems slowly killing progress.
Exactly. Or, as he also puts it, a dearth of optimism, just a fundamental lack, a shortage of it.
So the sentence, this effect might seem small in isolation, but it's death by 1,000 paper cuts. It means those slightly slower projects, one after another, they really undermine the whole effort eventually.
You got it. That's the warning.
Okay, so wrapping this up, the big idea here is pretty clear. Our expectations about time aren't just passive predictions.
Not at all. They actively shape the outcome. Setting optimistic goals, keeping that tempo up, can paradoxically make things happen faster.
Faster than just being realistic.
Right.
So for you listening, especially the learner, maybe think about that limbo effect. Do you see it anywhere in your work or even your studies? Finishing right at the deadline?
Yeah, it's worth considering. And it leaves us with a final thought, doesn't it?
Which is?
If deliberately setting optimistic timeframes can speed us up, well, what other hidden assumptions, what other maybe slightly pessimistic beliefs might be holding us back without us even realizing it?
That's definitely something to chew on. What limits are we setting for ourselves just by expecting them?
Food for thought.